Now, while on one of my tours, while visiting Launch Complex 14 at Cape Canaveral, I met Thorton Hinshaw. He and his older brother grew up in and around the space program, and they said they had some interesting mementos of their father's time working there. Now, since Thornton lived just a few minutes away, we made arrangements to take a look at the materials he had from his mom and dad. When I arrived, Thornton had the materials arranged on the table. There were pictures of astronauts. This is a real autograph and inscription, but the rest look like auto pen signatures. But this document is what has my interest. His dad used this when working the launches at Cape Canaveral. And not just any launch, but that of Friendship 7 and John Glenn in 1962. His dad is this guy, Thornton Hinshaw. And he's the one doing the countdown. And here's the T minus 60 seconds and counting. This is the stuff that everyone remembers here. 19, 18. Then you get to T3 and T2. There's not a whole lot more checking in after that point.
Godspeed, John Glenn. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5,
4, 3. I can tell you that for the longest time we really, I guess my mom and dad knew what they had, but we didn't really realize what they had, because when we went to Tennessee, all of this stuff was just stuck up in the attic in Tennessee, and really didn't know what all was in there. So they just stuck it up there after they got it there, and it's literally stayed up there for 20 years. And then we got it out after they passed, and we were looking for all of this stuff. And I remember Mom and Dad saying, yeah, we got some launch countdown stuff, but really didn't realize that it was, one is the John Glenn and the other one is maybe Gordon Cooper's. And it's just kind of amazing. And like I said, it was stuck up in the attic for all these years. You can see O'Malley's got one, and he's got one in front of him. And I don't know what he normally would do with them, whether it was just an everyday thing, and normally just throw them in the trash can after it's done, or what they would do with them. I mean, you had O'Malley beside him, who's obviously the head guy in charge, and then he would be the one kind of coordinate to it and talking to the various other facilities around to make sure that they're go, and also doing the countdown portion of it. It was, like I say, it was him and one other guy that were the blockhouse monitors. So it was always one of those two once it got to the launch time, because at that point there he would go off and have long shifts. I assume they were probably 12-hour days or something, but a lot of time at the Cape once the launches started. Even before they got to these type things, they had so many failures out there, and things blowing up on the launch pad and things like that, and having to go into lockdown and things like that after it blew up. Blockhouse monitors, when it came time to actually somebody have to scrub the launch.
Total now, meter reads 19 volts. Total standby on, now meter reads 11.5.
He said it was a great big game of chicken because no one wanted to be the one to scrub the launch. So everybody held out to the absolutely last minute to fess up that they had an issue. I know that he worked on, obviously, the Mercury, the Gemini, and then eventually, when they went to the Apollo program, he left GD and went to Rockwell. Dad got laid off in '69, and Mom got laid off shortly after Dad got laid off, and Dad was out for a year before he found another job.
Did your dad ever have any regrets at all about working for the space program?
No, he absolutely loved the space program. So that was kind of the highlighted thing that he always, talked about when he was older. During the old days, was back in the days of the space program. Well, I remember we had some private tours of the Cape that we were taken on once, and I got to visit all the blockhouses and go up on the launch pads and things like that.
Thornton shared with us some of the Hinshaw home movies. I'm guessing this visit happened somewhere around 67 or 68. An actual Saturn V on its launch stand, driving on Launch Complex 39. A container for the liquid oxygen. The huge flame deflector that would sit under the Saturn V. The cavernous flame trench. And of course, families exploring.
They had a number of those kind of parties or meets and greets actually out on the Cape where the people could actually come visit and actually meet some of the astronauts and things like that. It was a much smaller community back in those days.
Then back to the Cape side with General Dynamics and Launch Complex 36, today leased by Blue Origin. I'm sure this is set up much like Launch Complex 14, where Thornton's father spent so many hours on end.
I do kind of remember going into the blockhouse that one day and just kind of being, awestruck at this is where all this stuff actually, takes place, and this is where Dad works. It's kind of funny. They've had these big rooms of these, I'll call them computers, but they probably put them in your phone at this point, and your phone's more powerful. Kind of odd living down here, and then all you literally do is walk out your front door and watch the launches.
And this is the place where I found out a bit about the Hinshaw family history. But this was shot almost 50 years earlier.
Oh, Titusville is a great place because a lot of open land, and we rode our bikes everywhere. It was a great place to be a kid. A lot of ponds to swim in, even though we shouldn't be swimming in there. Surprised we're still alive at this point, to a certain extent, because they had gators in there. But yeah, Titusville was a really good place to grow up back in those days.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's
pretty incredible. I have to thank you for letting me touch that piece of history, which is really incredible. I mean, actual John Glenn launch. First American in orbit. And he's from Ohio.
There you go.